What's up, guys? Double Axis podcast number 5. Gonna talk about a plethora of combat sports. There's quite a few cards coming up. The only problem is that there's not a lot of intriguing matchups on those cards. So we're gonna try to talk about several of them and just kind of break down the fights that I'm the most interested in. Gonna be a little bit different format, as you can see. I'm by myself again tonight. However, my man David is behind the camera, so he's going to kind of spit out the hottest takes and the hottest fights right now, and we're going to try to break them down and give some predictions on how I see them going. So, what do you got up first there, my man David?
What are your final thoughts on the McGregor fight?
Well, the McGregor fight, I actually just watched the final All Access. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, and in the moment, everything passes by so fast as far as the shots that are landing, the shots that aren't landing. So it's a little bit harder to dissect. I like to watch the fights probably 2 or 3 times where I can kind of rewind it and see what I missed. My thoughts didn't change a whole lot on the actual fight itself. I thought that Conor should have been throwing more power shots. I felt like he pulled a lot of punches. He was just trying to be active, and I feel like he failed. And I really feel like Floyd is just that good. Other than the one left uppercut that landed in the first round, I feel like all of the shots Floyd kind of saw coming and was able to get out of the way, even at 41, to where they just kind of clipped him. They didn't land with full power. I was really impressed with Floyd. I feel like Conor missed a lot of the opportunities there, especially in the earlier rounds when Floyd didn't have his timing. But it is what it is. I mean, you can't really go back and change it or rearrange it, and hopefully he uses it as a kind of a learning curve moving forward. On the last podcast, talked a little bit about kind of what wanted to see next out of Conor. And I've kind of changed my tune a little bit. Last podcast, I said the Nate Diaz fight was the fight that made the most sense to me. And then this week, Joe Rogan and Brendan Schaub were talking about Conor versus Pauly in Dublin, Ireland as a boxing match. And now that I've kind of had the time to think about it and process it, that would be a really fun fight. I mean, I can't imagine any fight being more fun than that one. You can put it up in a soccer stadium or whatever. Conor's going to sell it out if it's in Ireland. I'm sure that the pay-per-view numbers would be, decent. Obviously not Floyd-Conor numbers, but they're going to be up there pretty high. And, Nate's kind of got the Khabib mentality of not staying active. I mean, he's the least active guy in the division. He hasn't fought since he fought Conor. So, I mean, he's really just kind of waiting around for that money fight. And to me, at 55, I think Conor's just going to walk through him. So, I'm kind of losing excitement. I see the way that he kind of treated Schaub after the fight, and kind of just it put a bad taste in my mouth. It was really his chance to shine and to kind of lobby for that fight and make it huge. But the Diaz brothers, they just can't get out of their own way. And so, for me, the Pauly-Conor fight's really kind of gaining steam. If they could do it in Ireland, that would be pretty fun. I mean, and give Conor a little bit more time to prepare for boxing. He only was training for 8 months. Maybe figure out his conditioning. And Pauly's not going to be as elusive as Floyd was, so that could be fun. So, but anyways, yeah, that's pretty much my final thoughts on that. So, what we got up next, Dave?
What's your take on Jon Jones?
Oh, God. So the Jon Jones saga. Saw a lot of people on Twitter kind of saying that the test that was done the night of the fight was kind of vindicating Jones, proving his innocence. But the problem is that the test that was done on fight night was a blood test. And the steroid that he was caught for, the turinabol, I may not be saying that right. I've heard a lot of people say it, and I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. But it's an older steroid. It's from like the 80s, 90s. So you pretty much got to be in with the steroid game and know exactly, you know, how to take this product, how it works in the body, and that had to be what was going on with this. And it also can be kind of a masking agent for other things. So, but the only way that this is seen is in urine. It's not in blood, and so that's the reason that he tested hot for it in the urine sample and not the blood sample, because it's something that can only be tested for in that. And this is apparently a brand new test that you saw is brought about, I guess, because the Torino ball has been something that some of the fighters have been testing positive for. A lot of them are claiming tainted supplements, but it's apparently so hard to get your hands on that pretty much the only way that you can get it is by somebody that really knows what they're doing and put it in their body. So for me, it definitely didn't vindicate Jones. If anything, with knowing what I know now, and it's only available, you can only see it in urine and not the blood test, that kind of tells me that there's even something more fishy going on. And it only stays in your system like a couple days. So, to be in a system a couple days before the fight, that's pretty big. I'm not buying the tainted supplement. I think that it's probably going to put the nail in the Jones coffin. And unfortunately, himself and all the rest of the sport's probably going to lose him for a while. So it is what it is. What you got next?
Next up, we got Canelo versus Triple G. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm not sure that they're the smartest, since I'm not really what I would call a boxing expert. So, the Canelo Triple G fight, I'm super excited for it. I'm more excited about that fight than any fight that UFC has on the docket for the next couple months. For me, growing up watching Tyson on pay-per-view, and then Roy Jones, several of those boxing guys, there was kind of a dead period. I know a lot of people were watching the Floyd Mayweather fights. The only ones I watched were the ones that I thought he had a chance to lose. And I feel like that Canelo really, really brought me back into boxing. He's somebody that had a lot of hype around him, and when I first started watching him, I was really skeptical that he would be able to live up to the hype, with the Under Armour deal and everything that he had going on. But, in watching him and seeing how he performs, seeing the way that he just knocks people senseless, and the fact that he's fought a lot of tough competition, I became a huge Canelo fan. And I try to catch all of his fights, whether on pay-per-view or HBO Boxing. Even if I can't catch it on pay-per-view, then I'll watch the replay on HBO or Showtime, wherever it's on. But as of late, HBO. So I'm a huge Canelo fan. I think he's fought the tougher opponents. And, I see that Triple G, everybody's kind of seems to be in his corner for this. Watching him train and stuff like that, I can see how clean and how powerful he is. They're about the same size. And I just think that Canelo's really, he's fought the tougher guys. And from what I've seen from the highlight reels, Canelo seems to have the advantage in the punching power. So we'll see how it translates. I'm not really, the only reason that I felt like I could kind of break down Conor versus Floyd was because I knew Conor's MMA background. And, I felt like we broke it down pretty good. By the way that the fight played out and stuff like that. So to talk about Canelo Triple G from an analytical standpoint, I'm not sure that I could do, other than just to say as a fan, I can't wait. I'm hoping that it lives up to the hype. I love Canelo. I think that what he's done for boxing, at least for me personally, has really reinvigorated it for me. He's an exciting fighter that comes to finish fights, and that's hard to find in this day and age. So I'll definitely be watching it. As far as after it happens, I'll definitely mention in the next podcast to try to break that part of it down, but making predictions and stuff like that, other than just being super excited for it, and definitely saying that I'm pulling for Canelo. I don't feel like I'm the most qualified, but from what I've seen, just looking at the records, like I said, Canelo seems to be fighting the tougher opponents. He's got huge knockout power. Gennady is very technical. He looks very powerful himself, but I'm just not sure that he's fought the same quality of guys, and I think that it'll probably show up. And I think a lot of people will be surprised the first couple exchanges. And I really feel like that's Canelo's time to get his respect, and it may be kind of like the Floyd Connor. Connor had his chance to get Floyd's respect and didn't. So as the hype train comes in with Triple G, I feel like Canelo is definitely going to have to get his respect in those early exchanges, and then try to put it on him from there. So
Next up, we got UFC 215.
Yeah, so not a super exciting card. I probably personally will not pay for it. If some friend gets it, then I'll go watch it. And that's kind of the trend over the next couple of months for the UFC for me. They've got several cards, but the problem is that they don't have the star power to fill them out. So, but this is probably the best one of the next couple fight nights and pay-per-views. So, what's the first fight we're going to be breaking down there, Dave?
Melendez versus Stevens.
Okay, so to me, probably fight of the night candidate for sure. Stevens, he's kind of had a little bit of a bad run of late, and so is Melendez. Melendez has had some time off. Stevens always there to fight. He always brings it, and so does Melendez. So it's a very close fight, but I feel like that it could for sure steal the show. For me, I would probably have to lean towards Melendez. I think he's fought the tougher guys. He's fought the bigger guys throughout his career. Melendez has lost something like 4 out of his last 5. However, every single one of those opponents has been right up there at the upper echelon. So Stevens is I think he's lost 3 or 4 out of his last 5 as well. So he's kind of had a little bit of a bad run. Some of those guys have been towards the top, and then he beat Henry Barral as one of his wins, but I don't feel like that they're losing the same caliber of guys. I feel like that Stevens could come in and put the pressure on and make it a brawl, and that's probably going to give him the advantage. And then for Gill, I feel like his pace could really wear Stevenson out, being super technical, trying to shoot for his takedowns and controlling the fight, if he needs to, if the combinations aren't going his way. But for me, it's kind of hard to pick against Gill coming back in his first fight after a little while off, and knowing the caliber of people that he's kind of fought of late, So I would probably have to go with Gill on that one. So what's up next?
With the Dos Anjos fight versus Magny.
Okay, yeah, that's a super tough fight to pick. Obviously, Dos Anjos had that crazy run at 55, eventually losing the belt, and then losing a fight to Ferguson that kind of put him out of the division, and he bounced up to 170 and won his debut at 170. And now you got him kind of fighting a guy that's proven in the division in Magny. First of all, it's such a tough fight to pick because you really don't know what you're going to get out of Dos Anjos at 170. Yeah, he fought Saffiedine, but Saffiedine had been out for a while, so I'm not really sure how good the gauge is on that as far as telling what Dos Anjos has at 70. Magny's a super big guy. He's 6'3". Dos Anjos is like 5'9", so he's going to have a huge height and reach advantage. Magny never, ever gets tired. And Dos Anjos at 55 had an incredible pace as well, just really pressuring guys, keeping them back against the cage and kind of controlling them. And I don't think that he'll be able to do that with Magny. It's a crazy tough fight to make a pick. For me, I think that the size alone kind of gives Magny an advantage in this fight. I think that Dos Anjos is really more suited for 55 with his height and the fact that the tear that he went on down there. So I'm not really sure what went into the decision of him moving up. I'm not sure. A lot of people have talked about the USADA changes and the change in his kind of physique and stuff from there. So I'm not sure if he just was such a big guy and cutting the weight and everything started to wear on him, so he wanted to move up to 70. But I'm not convinced that it's the best weight class for him. He's gonna be giving up an incredible height and reach in this fight alone. And I really feel like that Magny can kind of control the pace and kind of dictate how everything goes. And I'm not sure that Dos Anjos will be able to get off his offense the way that he could against a smaller guy at 55. So I think it's really interesting. I think that Dos Anjos has definitely fought the tougher guys. Obviously has the better pedigree, but I'm just not convinced that he can kind of get over the height and the reach and the size of Magny in this fight. So I would probably lean towards Magny, probably some type of decision, controlling the fight, maybe getting him down, and just kind of wearing him. But Dos Anjos, during his run, man, he showed some. He was just incredible. He beat taller guys like Nate Diaz. So I mean, he definitely has an him. Obviously, two different animals in Magny versus Diaz, but I feel like that it could be a very competitive fight. I just see that once again the size of Magny kind of proven to be insurmountable for Dos Anjos, and maybe Dos Anjos drops back to 55, where I think he has a little bit better matchups going on. So, what's up?
What's your thoughts on Nunes versus Shevchenko?
And that's an awesome fight. I was super excited for it last time. Of course, got scrapped at the last minute. I feel like that Shevchenko is a complete fighter. Obviously, Nunes came in and she took the title and then really beat up Rousey. They fought before. It was a really close matchup. I think Nunes faded later on. And I think that Shevchenko is just on such an incredible run right now. I really see her winning this fight. Obviously, Nunes winning the title and then beating Ronda, I'm not impressed by the Ronda win at all. I don't think that, we can go into my feelings about Ronda. I was never convinced that she was who she said she was or who everybody else said she was, be able to beat men and all this crazy stuff. I just feel like she's a product of her time. She came in when the weight class was a little bit open, just getting started. These ladies evolved, and she really didn't. And the talent just was up and up and up. And, she tried to turn herself into a striker and everything else, and it didn't work out for her. And she got head kicked by Holm. She came back, and they gave her a title shot right away just on name appeal alone. She came out and tried to be the killer that she was before, and I don't think that was the best way to go about it. She made her cage walk, and I made the comment, she's done. There's no possible way, because Ronda couldn't come in with the same attitude that she did before, that she was just going to be a super intimidating fighter and kind of run over everybody. It didn't fly for me. Like, there's no way after getting head kicked in oblivion that you can come back out and act like you're still the same killer. So I feel like that they just kind of tossed that up for Nunes. And then, Shevchenko's been on a crazy run of late, and she gets the title fight, and at the 11th hour, Nunes backs out of it. And I was feeling like Shevchenko was definitely going to win at that point. And, I'm not sure much has changed. I think that Shevchenko still got the momentum, even though Nunes just kind of beat Rousey, but like I said, to me that wasn't anything that was compelling or changed my opinion about her. She's a nasty striker. I think Shevchenko is as well. For me, I see Shevchenko being able to put more combinations and kicks together, and then also if it goes to the ground, I feel like that Shevchenko could really put her in some positions that she might get a submission win as well. I think Nunes is going to have more size on her, so that could be a factor. But I just feel like that everything points towards Shevchenko at this point in time, and I'm really going to be pulling for her because I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the lady fighters, but she's somebody that's really won me over. She's just nasty. She is so versatile. She can get it done so many different ways, and I'm a big fan. I think she would be a really good champion, and even if she's not a champion, I think she's going to put on a really good show. So definitely a good fight. What's up next? Main event.
Main event: Johnson versus Bull.
Yeah, this is probably the. I'm just not excited about it at all. I think Johnson had his moment to do something that's a little bit transcending for himself and trying to take a fight with Dillashaw. He passed on it. They offered him more money. He still passed on it. And, he kind of handpicked this fight against Borg. Borg's like 11-2. He's had weight cutting issues in the past. And, he's a very good grappler. But I just think that Johnson is too complete. And I think that he wanted a fight that he felt like he could win without question to get the record for the UFC title defenses. So on that alone, I wouldn't buy this pay-per-view because I feel like I said, he had it right in the palm of his hand to do something different, to bring in a challenger from a heavier weight class, to really bring in a lot of excitement to the 125-pound division, and he just kind of dropped the ball. He's like, oh, no, I'm going to fight this other dude. So for me, even though Mighty Mouse is from Kentucky, and, Kentuckians like to stick by each other, I don't feel like he gained any fans there at all. I feel like the Dillashaw fight would have been huge. I would have been super excited about it, but this fight just does nothing for me. I feel like it's just a hand-picked cakewalk for Mighty Mouse to grab the record. And then, what's next for him after that? I don't know. But I know one thing, that no matter what he does after this, it will never be the same for me after he kind of passed up that opportunity to make that huge super fight. Because he's pretty much cleaned out the division. He had the chance to make his record-setting title defense against somebody that was a huge name that could have been a big draw for the UFC. And he's like, no, I'm going to fight Ray Borg instead. And, there's no possible way that's going to do the pay-per-view numbers of Dillashaw. There's not going to be the excitement about it. And just another missed opportunity in the UFC right now, for one of the champions to kind of pick and choose his fights. And I feel like that the pay-per-view numbers are really going to suffer because of it. So it's a real bummer. So, for me, looking at that card, I would much rather watch the Melendez-Stevens fight or the Shevchenko-Nunez fight than I would the title fight, the main event title fight. So that's kind of bad to say, but, it's just the truth. You got somebody that's 11-2 against somebody that's got 23 fights overall. And, he's had, like I said, Borg's had weight cutting issues in the past. I'm not really sure where that puts him coming in this title fight. That could be a gigantic problem on weigh-in night. But I was really pumped for the Dillashaw fight, and when that fell through, it just kind of crushed me as far as the momentum that I had for this card, because it's not the greatest card from top to bottom, and that one really would have made it a marketable fight, a marketable card, and really done the UFC a favor there. So it's a giant bummer, and I'm sure that he'll probably get his record-breaking title defense exactly like he wanted, and then he's probably going to have some trouble getting a super fight after that. So, but we'll see. What's up next?
Let's hear your thoughts on Rockhold versus Branch at Fight Night 116.
Yeah, man, there's two fight nights back to back, and they're not the greatest. The main event is definitely the best fights on both cards. There's a couple of other good fights on what fight night did you say that was?
116.
116. So there's a couple good fights on there, but nothing that really blows your hair back. Kind of glad to see Rockhold get back in there. He's a guy that, he had such a short title run that he really didn't get a lot of steam behind him. I feel like he took Bisping kind of lightly and got beat and lost his title, and then kind of went away for a long time doing different things with modeling and acting. So I'm glad to see him get back in the ring. He's not getting a cakewalk per se. David Branch was a 2-division champion in World Series of Fighting. He signed with the UFC. Had not exactly. It wasn't a stellar performance after he signed, and so now I feel like this is just kind of a tune-up fight for Rockhold. The 85 division is by far one of the best right now in the UFC. So I'm excited to see Rockhold get back into the mix. I feel like they probably could have made some bigger fights with him, but this is a pretty good tune-up fight for him. It'll really be really see where he's at, if he's ready to kind of reascend the ranks, or if he's happy with his modeling and his acting and everything like that. So the UFC's probably smart in giving him this tune-up fight to see where his head's at, to see how they wanted to kind of take the approach moving forward. But as far as the rest of the card, there's a couple of names on there, but even the names are like on the preliminaries. So, you know, once again, kind of a missed opportunity, another fight night for the UFC, just chunking them out instead of kind of combining them and making them a little bit bigger cards.
What about Fight Night 117, Shogun versus St. Preux? What are your thoughts?
Once again, just I really don't know why. Shogun's won every fight since St. Preux knocked him out, but they haven't been against really the top competition, although the top 5 of the light heavyweight division, once you get past 5, there's really a big drop-off. I definitely feel like that Shogun and St. Preux are right there in the top 5. St. Preux, after losing to Jones, nothing really impressive on his resume, but I still feel like he's the younger, more dynamic fighter, and I feel like that he's probably going to get it done again against Shogun, as bad as that hurts me to say, because I just feel like that Shogun's so depleted from all the wars that he had in Pride, and then coming to the UFC when he won the title. Just a ton of wars against just the cream of the crop guys at 205. And I feel like that now his fights, you can see it, he's a little bit more sluggish. His chin's not as good. He's not as dynamic of a kicker as he used to be. So I feel like that St. Preux at this point in time is, a younger guy, a more dynamic, more explosive guy. And I feel like that he's probably going to get it done again. But, you look at the rest of that fight card, and once again, there's nothing there. I don't really know why the UFC has to put out so many of these fight cards. I don't know if it's a contract or what it is, but it's really watering down their product as a whole. I feel like that you could have combined these two and, maybe put another third or fourth good fight in there, and then you got, two fights with big names. And I'm not really sure what's going on with the UFC right now. I feel like that you can see it in the viewership and stuff like that. It's just the sport's not in a good place right now, and really need something to kind of snap it out of it. And I'm hoping that the UFC 217 card, which we'll talk about just briefly here in a little bit, but I'm hoping that might be the card that kind of snaps the UFC out of this rut that they've been in. But those 2 fight nights are just an example of kind of letting time slip by and just putting fights out there just to have the fights out there, instead of making them, good quality cards with good quality fights. So,
moving away from UFC, we got Bellator 183. Do you want to talk about Pico first?
Yeah. So Bellator 183, a really strong card, especially once again for free TV. They got Brandon Pico on there, and he had all this hype coming in, and then got submitted on the Madison Square Garden pay-per-view card. So that kind of sucked, all the hype and the anticipation that was around him. So excited to see the improvements and stuff that he's made. Unfortunately, they don't even have an opponent for him named. So kind of talking about the UFC dropping the ball here. I don't know if it's just because of the dude's resume, they're having a hard time finding somebody to fight him or what, but the card's getting close, and I'd really like to see them name an opponent. I don't really want it to be a gimme fight. I mean, obviously the last fight, that's what they tried to have happen, but it didn't work out for him. So I would really like to see him against somewhere around a mid-level competitor, to see really see where he's at and see if the hype's worth it. But it's just disappointing at this point that they haven't named an opponent.
Let's talk about Daly versus Larkin.
Yeah, super good fight. Daly versus Larkin. So Larkin had, wasn't winning any fight of the nights against Lima. He lost the title fight. Daly got murked by Rory. So you got guys kind of coming off losses, and really could put on a good fight. It's a really good matchup. Both stand-up guys. I would say that as far as the raw power in his hands, it probably has to go to Daly. However, Larkin kind of brings in the kicks and putting combinations together, which is going to make him pretty dangerous. Both are going to be pretty much perennial contenders. Larkin came over from the UFC with a lot of hype. They gave him the title fight right away, and it didn't live up to the billing. It was kind of a boring 5-round fight. Really wasn't a lot of compelling drama that happened in it. And like I said, Daly just got worked by Rory in the first round. So to me, I think that Larkin's in a better position right now. I think that he knows that he needs to live up to the hype that was behind him when he signed. A lot of guys were saying that he would beat Lima. So I feel like that there's a lot of pressure on him to perform and kind of live up to that hype from when he came over to the UFC. And Daly, he's kind of more of a one-trick pony, with the punches and not much after that. So I give the advantage to Larkin. I see Larkin being able to kind of stand on the outside, pick him off with kicks and real clean combinations. Daly, of course, if he lands, it's going to be a tough night for Larkin. But I really feel like that Larkin should be able to stay on the outside, pick him off with combinations, land some leg kicks, stuff like that to get Daly off balance and to be able to kind of work his game. And then if push comes to shove, I feel like that Larkin's far more suited to be able to take him down and control the fight from the top. If for whatever reason Daly clips him or he feels like that Daly's getting the better of combinations and he needs to kind of change things up, he can hit that takedown and do some damage from the top and kind of control the fight. So for me, that I think I would have to lean towards Larkin in that. And 170-pound division in Bellator is, really compelling right now. You got those two guys. You got Rory. You got Lima as the champion, and Korshkov is an absolute killer. So he just beat up Chidi pretty bad in the first round. So there's exciting things happening at welterweight in Bellator right now. So can't wait to see how the matchup plays out.
What's your take on the next fight? We got Roy Nelson versus Ayala.
I feel like it's a pretty good matchup for Roy coming into Bellator. Ayala had a really impressive win in his last outing. He seems to be one of those guys that, even though he's not super impressive with his physique, and his punches don't seem to land, as cleanly as other guys, he does have the power to put guys to sleep. He knocked out Sergey Haritonov, who's a legend in Japan pretty much. Has a who's list of wins that he's just, murder people with punches, and then he comes in and he gets knocked out in the first round by Ayala, and it was an awkward punch from a weird angle. When he hit him, it didn't seem like, it was overly impressive as far as the sound or anything, but, Haritonov went down and didn't get up. So he reminds me a lot of Ozdemir in that the combinations and stuff that he throws out there, you watch them and you're like, those aren't the cleanest. They don't seem to be landing the hardest, and yet guys just fall. So he's obviously got a whole lot of power. And that's kind of what Roy Nelson's known for, his one-punch knockout power. Had a really good run in the UFC, beat a lot of top guys. So it's a really exciting matchup for Bellator. And, maybe a year or two ago, it wouldn't have been that competitive of a matchup. But, Roy's had a couple knockout losses. His last loss in the UFC was by a decision to I can't remember his name. I think it's Volkov. Can you look that up for me? It was a decision loss. He was kind of beat up pretty easily in that fight, and so I feel like he's got something to prove. And Bellator could have a pretty hot commodity in Ayala. So like I said, a couple years ago, it wouldn't look good on paper. It'd be like, oh gosh, they're feeding this dude to Roy Nelson. But it's obviously a pretty close matchup right now. Obviously, I would give the edge to Volkov. Is that who it was? Okay, so I had it right. But obviously, as far as experience and stuff goes, Nelson has the edge. He's fought the tougher guys, and he's a more proven commodity to me, so that I would have to lean towards Nelson. But really interested to see what happens if Ayala does land on him, if it's one of those touch of death guys that he just hits you and you fall down. But definitely would have to lean towards Nelson in this fight, and it sets up some exciting fights at heavyweight for Bellator, and I feel like that's kind of one of the biggest reasons that Bellator's where they are right now. I feel like they could be in a lot better position, but their heavyweight division never seems to kind of stack up to the UFC's. But now UFC's heavyweight division's in a pretty rapid decline, and it seems to me that Bellator's got quite a few competitive matchups. Now, am I saying that Bellator's heavyweights are better than the UFC's? No, absolutely not. But there are some exciting fights where the UFC seems to be running out of those exciting fights because they've all pretty much fought each other at this point. They can't even really find anybody for Stipe to fight. So it'd be nice to see Bellator get some a couple good matchups and maybe a heavyweight title fight to get that heavyweight title kind of locked down to one person, and then kind of see how it plays out.
Last fight on Bellator 183, Henderson versus Pitbull. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, it's a really exciting fight. Henderson kind of got thrown to the wolves right away. Signed him with Bellator. They gave him Koreshkov at 170, and that was not a very competitive fight. He definitely showed a lot of heart and a lot of chin in that fight because Koreshkov was just teeing off on him, but he kind of took everything that Koreshkov had. And so after that fight, he goes down to 55 and he fights Michael Chandler, who's definitely one of the top lightweights in the world right now. Should be champion if it wasn't for an ankle turn. He would still be the champion in my opinion. So they give him a really tough second fight. He goes out there and he's getting teed off on in the earlier rounds, and then he kind of excelled whenever Chandler started to get tired and made it a really close fight. I felt like Chandler still won because of the amount of damage and stuff that he did early on in the rounds. Nevertheless, it was far more exciting than the Koreshkov fight, and to me showed that he had a home at 55 as opposed to trying to go up and fighting the monsters at 170, especially knowing what we just kind of broke down about the 170-pound division in Bellator and kind of the rise that it's on. So I feel like that I just feel like he's better all around than Pitbull. Pitbull's an exciting fighter, both of them, but you kind of saw where he was at when he fought Chandler, and Chandler flatlined him there in the first round. I feel like that's kind of where he's at. I feel like he's somewhere middle of the pack, and I truly believe that Henderson belongs towards the top. Obviously, you're going to have Chandler go back for the rematch after turning his ankle in Madison Square Garden and get that resolved. But after that, I feel like that Henderson's probably going to go out there, outclass Pitbull, and be right in line for the next title shot. So I feel like once again, it just shows kind of the upswing that Bellator's on. This is a pretty stacked card. This is a fight that I'm really interested in. I truly believe that, like I said, that Henderson's the better fighter right now. I feel like he's just got a better all-around game where he can kind of dictate exactly how he wants it to go. If he wants to stand up and strike with him, he's going to. If he wants to take him down, he's going to take him down. And I feel like that Henderson's going to walk away with this win, and then it's going to set up some pretty intriguing fights for him in the future towards the top of that division, because I feel like that he should be next in line for a title shot, especially after the close contest with Michael Chandler before. And I feel like Michael Chandler's going to get his belt back, and that's going to set up the rematch for them. So
shifting back to UFC, why don't you touch a little bit on UFC 216 and Lee versus Ferguson?
Yeah, that's the only good fight on the card for me that really sticks out. That I really want to see. It's for the interim title. For presumably who Conor's going to fight when he comes back. I'm not so convinced that that's how it's going to work out. Khabib couldn't make weight or for whatever reason wouldn't sign the dotted line to fight Ferguson. So now you got Kevin Lee that's boosted up off his win off of over Michael Chiesa, and so that's for the interim title. It's the main event, and they really haven't done those guys any favors by filling out that card. So I don't want to dive too much into it. We already said on the last podcast that we believe that Ferguson is probably going to get the better of that fight, and he's probably going to become interim champ. And I still believe that. I feel like that he's just a more experienced fighter. He's far more hungry for the title with all the build-up and everything else that's going on. And I feel like that he's going to get the title, and then he's going to be wanting the Conor fight. Whether that happens, I'm not sure. But they really need to help those guys out and fill that card out, especially if they want to sell any pay-per-views at all with that. Because at this point in time, that's once again a card that I'm not going to purchase. So they do have a little bit of time, but there's an awful lot of fights on there. So I'm not sure if they're going to really fill it out or not. But if they do, or I would say regardless if they do or they don't, we're probably going to touch on it a little bit more in the next podcast, trying to break that fight down a little bit more and anything else that may be on that card that we find compelling. So, but man, UFC, get it together, put some good fights on those cards, and show us again a reason to buy these cards.
So looking into the future, what's like our next podcast? Do you want to go ahead and preview them?
Yeah.
Got some guests coming up.
So with the next couple podcasts, I'm gonna try to do something different. I'm gonna try to have some guests on. The next one is probably gonna be with my friend Jerry Tyrell. He's someone that I kind of latched onto in my career, and someone that's kind of, I always say that he's living my life just like 10 years ahead of me, and vice versa. I'm living his 10 years behind him. So he's got a lot of cool perspectives. He's actually the one that got me directed towards podcasts. So he's really the reason that this is happening, the reason that I was able to listen to those. So don't want to dive in too much of that to take too much of the content away from that actual one, but that actual podcast. But I'm going to have him on and have him talk about his life and kind of the way that ours intersected, how our friendship kind of developed. And he's got some pretty exciting stuff going on where he's going to try to get a website going and maybe a podcast going on for some fantasy football, mainly Dynasty League stuff. So that's something that I dabble in as well, and excited to hear how he's going to make himself different from the other fantasy football websites that are kind of out there. And I really feel like that he's got the personality and the knowledge to fit the bill. We don't always get along, but we don't always have the same perspective on things, and he's going to let you know about it. But I feel like that's one of the reasons that he's become one of my best friends, is because he's always going to call me out on it if he sees it differently. And he's really coming from a different perspective than a lot of my friends. He's from Louisville, kind of being in a smaller town life here. He really has a lot of different perspectives, and I think that that's really going to come out in this podcast here, as well as his fantasy football podcast. And then I've been in talks with another guest, a personal friend of mine growing up. We kind of competed against each other in sports and stuff, and now he's a big superstar. But been in talks with Matt Bradford coming on and doing a podcast with us, which is very exciting for a lot of you that don't know. You go check him out on social media. He's an inspiration to me every day. We're the same age. He enlisted and went to Iraq and stepped on an IED, and instead of kind of going the path of I stepped on an IED, I lost my legs, I lost my vision, I got shrapnel blown in my body, and kind of giving up. Instead of doing that, he continues to do stuff all the time as far as speaking engagements. He does a lot of like Spartan runs and things like that are just incredible for someone that has kind of been dealt the adversity that he has to be doing. And for me, like I said, he's just an everyday inspiration. You get on his Instagram account and he's doing push-ups and pull-ups and working out, and you really can look at yourself in the mirror and be like, man, you got no excuse not to be doing something with your life right now. So I can't wait to have him on, talk maybe some early life and competing in sports against each other, hear a little bit of his story as far as his service, and kind of go over really what he's doing today, which is the most inspirational part to me, with a lot of the engagements that he does and all the physical races and everything. He's an incredible guy, so I'm very excited to have him on. And then probably after those two, the which will be the most, I guess, the next UFC, which is UFC 217, right?
Yeah, 217.
Bellator as well.
Yeah, Bellator 185, 186.
Yeah. So the top of the Bellator cards, 185, 186, have some good matchups on them. So definitely want to break those down, and hopefully those cards fill out as well. To give us lots to talk about in the 217 card, which is GSP versus Michael Bisping. It doesn't get much bigger than that for me, and hopefully have a special guest on that one as well to kind of break down the fights and to get a little bit of a different perspective than myself or Billy's. So it should be an exciting time. We're probably going to pump out 3 or 4 podcasts in the next 3 or 4 weeks, going on a wide array of different subjects. So should be pretty fun, should be exciting, and maybe give everybody a little bit different look than just the combat sports and hunting. So anything else from you, Dave?
No, I believe that's it, but I'm really looking forward to the next couple people we got coming in.
Yeah, and Dave's going to be
something to look forward to for everybody.
Dave's going to be more of a he's going to be very vocal and maybe try to do this setup where I'm not sitting here staring at a sheet of paper, and he's going to kind of help with the pace and everything like that. And also, hopefully soon, he's going to shoot back some of his different perspectives on things. So he's always got a good point of view. So thank you guys so much for listening to the 5th installment of this. I appreciate it very much. I put a lot of work into these things, so it's always good to see the views and everybody's support. Make sure that you subscribe to our page, that you like the videos, and you check us out on Facebook and Instagram as well. I will try to keep those up to date with kind of the latest things that we have going on. So I appreciate it very much, and we'll see you the next go round.